Hi again. In this video, I want to show you a learning module in depth. So as I mentioned, in the other course tour video, um, I gave you kind of an overview of where to find things. Here, I'm just starting from the content section of things. Um, if you've already looked at the overview and syllabus, then you're ready to jump into the first learning module. Um, Unit 1 module is a bit different than the other ones because you'll be doing introductions on the discussion board. You'll do your first annotations, but you won't have to follow the exact guidelines of the annotations for Unit 2 through 6. There, in Unit 1, the assignment is more about getting started with either Twitter or Hypothesis, or both if you're so inclined. There's also an activity to get you started with Tiki-Taki, our timeline platform. And the focus in Unit 1 is thinking about um, history as a discipline of study, and how we study the past. So what is this thing called historical thinking that historians do to figure out what happened in the past? That's all part of Unit 1. I'm just going to leave it there because you can click in and follow along in the unit the same way, essentially, that I'm showing you for Unit 2. But I want to show you Unit 2 because it's typical of what all of the other course units will look like. Also, you'll notice Unit 2 lasts for 2 weeks. It runs from a Monday to a Sunday. Unit 1 also runs from a Monday to a Sunday, but it only lasts for 1 week. So that's something to keep in mind. Most units, with the exception of the first one, run for 2 weeks. So I've clicked into Unit 2. And as you scroll up, you'll see, again, Unit 2, the title, the dates that it spans. I always include an image that has something to do with what we're studying, as well as the title for this particular unit. If you click the first item, the intro and objectives, that will put you into the information that you'll need to complete the learning module. So every unit starts with intro and objectives, units 2 through 6, I should say. And it gives a short overview in a couple of paragraphs of the history, the historical issues that we'll be studying in that unit, the time frame, and so on. And then it gives you a kind of checklist of what you need to do and by when. So during the first week of the 2-week unit, by the first Sunday, you need to do the readings and complete the reading annotations. Then during the second week, by that Wednesday, do the first step of the timeline. And then by the second Sunday, which is also the last day of the unit, you'll do your connection step for the timeline and either a journal or a discussion. You don't have to do both. You can always choose whether to do a discussion or a journal, and you don't have to stick with journals if you did the journal the first time around. If you get to Unit 4 and you want to do the discussion instead, you can switch over and do that. It just gives you some choice. You can do one or the other to round out the unit. Each of these opening sections of the module has the objectives for the unit in terms of the content we're studying, and then an overview video. And as you'll notice, these videos are a little old. You can maybe tell why I started shaving my head and things like that. But at any rate, hopefully I will be updating those in the not too distant future. To navigate to the next section of the module, just use these arrows. And of course, you can go back using those arrows as well if you have that need. In Unit 2, I have this section called How to Read for our New Mexico history class. This is not typical. This is only in Unit 2. But I really want to emphasize you don't need to try to read everything word for word. There's a lot to cover. History is a reading heavy discipline. We read and we write a lot. And so we need to be savvy about that and systematic about the way that we do it. So here in this video, I give you some ideas about it. Do note that I made this for an intercession section of my class. So in the intercession, because it only lasts for 2 weeks for the reading annotations, I only give the option for Twitter and not for Hypothesis. So I may not have made any reference to Hypothesis here. Just know, some things might be slightly different, but in terms of the reading strategies, that's all going to be worthwhile and applicable to our class. Moving on to the next section of the unit learning module. Here are where the readings are listed. These are listed in the syllabus as well. But here I also included some questions to consider. these are not for an assignment or anything. They're just things to get you thinking, right? So as you read through these questions before you jump into the readings, they might help you to have kind of your eyes open for what the key issues might be in this particular set of readings. And of course, these readings, this podcast, this is a interactive website. These are the required things, the materials. Everything down here is optional. So if you can get to it, that's awesome. If you're interested in getting to it, that's great. If you're not and you don't ever want to even open it, that's also fine. But it's just there as additional resources. The next section of each module is a film clips page. These are short videos that are relevant to what we're studying in the unit. And as I note at the beginning of all of these, once it finally loads, if you can't get to any of these, that's okay. The readings are kind of the core of the materials and what we're doing in class. The videos are meant to give you a different perspective or maybe help you answer questions that you had that you weren't sure how to answer just based on the readings alone. So again, these are giving you different perspectives, different ideas. But as I scroll down, you'll notice there's way too much here. You are not expected to try to get through all of these. But if you can watch a couple of them, that's awesome. And please do. Moving on to the next one. Every now and then I'll put an FYI section in a unit learning module that has something to do with how the past is connecting to the present. That's what this one's about. The Idle No More movement is an Indigenous rights movement that is currently active. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can check that out. Every learning module has this reading annotation section. And so what you do here, this is telling you, okay, we gave you the readings. You need to show that you've read them in some way. That's what the annotations assignment is about. It's about thinking about taking notes on what you've read. So you're going to want to kind of identify the most significant, what you see as the most significant and important parts of the reading and indicate why. And then you're going to respond to some of your classmates in terms of whatever responses or comments come into your mind as you read other folks' ideas about the readings. We're all going to approach these things differently. And as I've sort of alluded to, in a survey course like this, we're covering New Mexico history from the earliest inhabitants to the present, more or less. We're not going to be able to get into everything in detail. And so it's up to you to kind of figure out what are the most significant things that are making the most sense for you and helping you to better understand how our past is informing our present. So you'll write about those either on Twitter or on Hypothesis. If you click into the reading annotation submodule, the annotations assignment is there. The detailed assignment is there. It's also here. But if you click this one, it'll take you to the video tutorials for Twitter and Hypothesis and give you a little more information. So there's not a set number of annotations that you have to make, but you do have to comment in a substantive way on at least 2 or 3 of the assigned chapters or articles. So on at least 2 or 3 of the assigned readings in that assigned reading section that I showed you, you need to make very substantive, meaning specific, direct, and you've explained why you've made this comment about this part of history. That's what you're doing, whether you do it on Twitter or on Hypothesis here. And as with everything else, I've given you resources for how to get started with those things, but if you have questions, please let me know. I'm here to help. Similarly, here's all the information you need for the timeline ID step. With the timeline assignment, you'll pick a topic, any topic of your choice, something that you read about in the unit materials, something that you didn't read about in the unit materials, but you thought had something to do with this part of our history. That could be okay too, because not everything appears in our historical study that could or should. So you can add that to the timeline. You click here to get a detailed overview of the assignment instructions. You can click this link to go to the timeline itself. And, in all of this, there are video tutorials and an explanation of how to add your materials to Tiki-Taki. So all of that's there for you. And again, let me know if you have questions. With the timeline assignments, you'll have to post your work not only to the timeline on Tiki but also here in Brightspace. And so, as with the ID step, that's always due on the second Wednesday of each unit. The connection step's due on the last day of the unit, and this is where you will connect to someone else's entry on the timeline and explain how your two topics connect to each other and why that matters. Um, that explanation is here. But you'll also, as with the ID step, upload your file that you created to do the work where you wrote your entry. From that file, you'll just copy and paste stuff over to the timeline. And that's explained in those video tutorials for the timeline specifically. Moving on through a typical unit module. And again, remember, you have 2 weeks to do all this stuff every time. So don't feel like, oh my God, there's so much here. It's intensive. It's a college course, but there should be plenty of time to work through things and think about things. As you can read here, at the end of each unit, you either complete a journal assignment or a discussion assignment. It's totally up to you which one you choose. You don't have to do both. Don't do both. That's extra work. You don't need to do both. You click here to get the overview of the instructions for a journal assignment. The journal is essentially reflective about what you learned and what meant the most during this unit. And you submit it here. Or if you don't want to do a journal, you can do the discussion. The discussion's always different. So for Unit 2, we're talking about the removal of the Juan de Oñate statue because Unit 2 covered Oñate's colonization of New Mexico. And so we're thinking about his legacy here. And this assignment asks you to write a letter to the Rio Arriba County manager making a recommendation. The discussion assignments are always going to be a little different, but they're going to have something kind of a creative aspect to them. Like this one, you're writing a letter to the county manager. One of them asks you to make a meme about the U.S.-Mexico War. Others ask you to make an advertisement for the Santa Fe Railroad, things like this. So you'll post that work on the discussion board, and then you'll make at least one response to one of your peers. And so you can do this in place of the journal to kind of round out the unit, or you can do the journal. That's up to you. And again, I think I mentioned this before, but you can do the discussion for Unit 2, and then you get to Unit 3 and decide, no, I don't want to do that discussion. I'm going to do the journal, and that's fine too. You can switch off and choose one or the other each time, each unit. You don't always have to do the same one. At the end of each unit, there's a self-assessment and looking ahead. Essentially, this is the reverse. It's not even reverse. It's just a checklist again. So make sure you did the reading. You did the, I'll have to fix this. In some of the courses, the intercession, particularly, I call this reading tweets instead of reading annotations. But this means you've completed your reading annotations. You've done both parts of the timeline, and you've done a journal or discussion. Then it tells you, be thinking about the final project. When we get to Unit 3, you'll submit a topic and a question, a research question. You'll do your bibliography or long list of sources by November 21st, just before Thanksgiving. And then the final project itself will be due on December 10th. So remember, that's way out there. It's the end of the semester. You've got a lot of time here. But ask questions as you go. I put some images at the end of these. Click forward. That should be the last thing in Unit 2. It is. Here you'll see Unit 3. And so same thing, scroll down, click Unit 3 intro and objectives to get into it, and you can just follow right along. And that's the way everything is organized. Again, if you're in the middle of a unit and you leave and want to come back, and you want to come back specifically to the reading annotations, you can just click directly to go there. So that's what this table of contents is kind of great for. You don't have to click through, step by step to get to things the way that I did. But if you're just working through the materials and through the assignment, that's a good way to go to make sure that you've covered everything. All right. Hopefully that's helpful and that makes sense. As with anything, everything relative to our class, please don't hesitate to let me know what questions you have, how I can help. That's what I'm here for. I hope you're having a good day, morning, evening, whatever it is when you view this, and I will talk to you soon.